keeping fit and refreshed?
Yeah, well, it was half-term last week.
Been away?
And, yeah, we went to Corfu. Every half-term this time of year, we go with a couple of families and we get a place somewhere, so we went to Corfu.
And did your daughter, of whom you told many a story last time when you were on the show, did she enjoy it?
Well, Peggy managed to... she's 9 now. Peggy managed to take the headlines, really. And we arrived on Monday, and on Wednesday, her and her mother and her friend Connie had been doing a fitness video called Urban Workout. Don't ask. But later on in the evening, we were all sort of inside, and Peggy was on the veranda, and apparently she wanted to show it to the other ones who hadn't seen it, so she was doing the urban workout on a glass table, and we heard this tremendous crash and came running out, and the glass was all shattered, and she was lying on the floor, and I think she'd gone into shock, and she was going, I don't know what's happened, I don't know what's happened, I don't know if it's painful, but it looks minging. But we looked down, and minging was the right word. It was horrific, really, something you never want to see in anyone, particularly your child. The skin was all lifted up. It was a terrible gash. I mean, it was something you would see in a horror movie. So I phoned the travel company. They were brilliant, and they got the doctor to come, because the hospital was about an hour away. So the doctor came, had a look at her, patched her up a bit. We immediately carried her into the car, took her down to the surgery, and for an hour and a half, 2 doctors sweated. It was like something from a film to try and stitch the skin back together, and it was awful. It was terrible for her. The pain was shocking, and I was sort of looking very intensely at her, trying to talk, you know, and distract her from the pain. They poured this hydrogen solution thing on it to freeze it, and she was just screaming at me, and she was grabbing my face, and at one point I was talking to her, and she went, Daddy, you've got a very, very fat chin. And you know, you're there seeing your child go through this torture, but you can't help but think, really? Do I really have a fat chin? I've worried about it in the past, but I thought it was okay. I'm going to have to do something about it. And then I kept talking to her, and she coped with it brilliantly, you know, and I kept talking, and at one point she just went, Shut up, Daddy. And it was like, I couldn't help but think about the time when her mother was giving birth to her. And her mother's a small woman, feisty but small, but Peggy was a big baby, you know. She came out about 9 pounds 4. I remember talking and sort of trying to be all new mannish when Sonia was giving birth to her, and at one point Sonia turned to me and went, Shh. Yeah, I was like mother, like daughter, but she was fine, thank God, and you know, I could have been a lot worse.
Well, tell us about this new project. It sounds fascinating, Jekyll and Hyde. It's a modern interpretation, I should say, of Robert Louis Stevenson's novella. Been done by 100 times or more by Spencer Tracy and Michael Caine and God knows who else. So what's the new take on it? Well,
it's sort of a modern retelling of it. You know, we set it now. It's full of technology. We think that in these sort of Orwellian times of everyone watching you, that whereas Victorian Hyde was monstrous and fanged, our Hyde, the baddie, is supposed to be sort of cool and attractive and sexy. You know, the modern face of evil, we think, is sexy. So they had a bit of work to do on that, to tell you the truth. But, you know, it was a fantastic challenge, I suppose, in a way, you know, for an actor to be given...
To play 2 parts.
Well, to get given 1 part. I've always been amazed when I got 1 part, never mind 2. And, you know, as great as it was, also because of the history the project brings, you know, because everyone, even if they've never read the novella, knows something about Jekyll and Hyde. We are familiar with that world. So it puts a wee bit of pressure on you, in a sense. What's
interesting is that concept you say there. I mean, we all think of it as that kind of hairy, fanged monster, don't we? But this guy's not. He's super cool.
He is.
He's an urban psychopath.
Absolutely. I mean, he has no morals. He lives without fear. He has superhuman powers. All he cares about is you know, eating, drinking, and having relationships with women. I mean, I don't know where I got the inspiration for it, to tell you the truth. But, you know, it's an actor's dream. And it really is, like, what I kept thinking about when I was doing it was, it reminded me very much, particularly finding the character of Hyde, about when I was a kid, you know, and at some point when, say, your relatives were around and you just were acting up a wee bit, and your mother said to you, will you stop showing off? And I remember the crushing blow that used to be when you were a child. and with Hyde and with this part, I was able to show off and no one to tell me off.
Because, of course, he is a child. He behaves like
absolutely.
a child.
And throughout the series, there's a lot of flashbacks. We see him at his very nascence. You know, we see Jackman, who is our Jekyll character, tapes him, locks himself up and puts the video recorder on to then be able to watch back who this person is.
Who he becomes.
Who he becomes.
Right. Now, OK, so let's now just set up this clip that we've got here. This is very early on in the first show in the series, and it's where you are talking to your assistant about what happens to you when you're possessed by this other man.
Yeah.
And you have a chair there in which you're to be strapped because you know, you can feel the onset of this other persona taking you over.
The woman sitting opposite you is Catherine Reimer. She's a psychiatric nurse with experience in related areas. She is fully apprised of the situation, and yes, she can be trusted. If you approve, she's coming to work for us, for both of us. She won't take sides. Please consider it. We can't go on the way we've been going. In the event she decides to release you from the chair, the cameras are on. You know the rules. If you do release him, there are 3 things he never leaves the apartment without. Digital recorder runs for 24 hours, kept on at all times unless by prior agreement. GPS keeps a track of his movements. Afterwards, you download everything onto the computer. There's time code on both so you can correlate.
You wear those things too?
Yes.
Mutual surveillance.
Exactly.
And the third thing?
The dictaphone. It's how we communicate.
What? Like we're running low on milk, that kind of thing?
Sometimes.
It's interesting, actually, because it's that you have a different, but not much different look as the alter ego.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No, it was because you know we spent a lot of time trying to work out and construct exactly how Hyde would look. And they didn't want it to be a huge difference, just a bit of, I mean, my stature changed a little bit. I stood more as Jackman. I'm more erect as Hyde. There was a wee bit of work done on, they sort of lengthened the nose a bit. They did something to the chin which made the cheekbones a bit higher. In fact, to tell you the truth, Hyde was exactly the way I'd like to look. So it was,
we had the hair, the curly hair.
Yeah, so it was very depressing at the end of each day, getting the wig off and taking the bits of stuff off. And, oh, aye, that's how I look, you know. But to be fair, you know, Michelle Ryan and particularly Gina Bellman, who plays my wife, they'd bring the Hyde out in anyone. And it was well written, you know. I mean, Orlando will tell you why, you know, he's so thrilled about doing the David Story play is because the words are so good. And Steven Moffat has created something very dark, very funny, quite camp. Well, actually, I'm quite camp in it, but, you know, it was just a pleasure to do. And so to go to work, and they're long old days, you know, 16-hour days can be long. And we do have enormous perks from it, but when
it's
you go
better
in...
than working, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it beats working for a living, I tell you.
I mean, you've also, had some very interesting jobs since last we met, because you've done a Woody Allen movie.
Yeah, I did. I did Match Point. Which I sort of, I mean, at the end, it's interesting if you work with Woody because with Woody, listen to me, with Woody, Orlando on my left, Mark on my right. Because he's a quiet, you know, a quiet man.
He doesn't interfere much, does he?
No, he doesn't. He just lets you get on with it. He shoots something kind of a big wide shot, and then he comes in, and he just lets you really get on with it. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough to work with directors like Paul Greengrass, Michael Winterbottom, Danny Boyle, and they all, although they're very different, they have this common thread which unites them, which is just no hidden agenda, no ego, and get on with it. But you're only allowed to see the bit of script that you're in. And as I was playing a cop trying to solve this crime, it was a wee bit tricky because I didn't know what the crime was I was supposed to be solving. on the first day. Although actually, but at the same time, that's quite good because usually if I get a script, I go not in it, not in it, not in it. Oh, that's interesting. Not in it. Yeah. But on the first day, you know, on his films, you don't get paid much, and everyone gets paid the same. Well, that's what they told me. I think they may have seen me coming there, but And everyone shares the same sort of trailer, a wee kind of half trailer, like a box, like a kind of a hutch. And on my first day, I went into what I thought was my trailer, and I walked in and I thought, oh, and there's all this stuff here, like fantastic champagne in the fridge, lovely, wines, amazing kind of like facial products and everything. I thought, God, actually, they really do look after you. And then I saw a bit of the script that I wasn't involved in. And I thought, oh, fantastic. They've let me have a wee idea about what's happening in the story. And I was just reading it, and someone knocked on the door, and it was the second assistant director, and he said, I'm sorry, James, this is Scarlett Johansson's trailer. So I left Scarlett's trailer and went back to my own to find a half bottle of Ballygown still water.
And also, too, the other interesting thing that we should mention is this work you've been doing for UNICEF. I mean, your mum always wanted you to be a missionary, didn't she?
Well, isn't it funny? She really did. I mean, she was, they were God... People say God-fearing people, but my parents were God-loving people, decent, good, churchgoers, and Mum was always very interested in the missionary work that people did in Africa, and certainly over the years I've strayed from the life of a missionary, but to be given this opportunity now to go, I was in southern Sudan there about
recently,
6 weeks ago to
That's
do it.
awful, then, isn't it?
It's just horrific, My sister-in-law, bizarrely, is the director of the Coalition Against Child Soldiers, who are a partner of UNICEF. And so they thought that would be good for me to go out there and try and raise awareness of just the terrible, terrible horrors that these kids have had to endure, captured at the age of 12, 13, taken off, displaced from their family not knowing where they've gone, marching for days to a unit, immediately being thrust into war, being forced to kill, being forced to beat women to death to show that violence means nothing to them. One of the boys I talked to said, I said to him, what did it feel? What was the pain like when you were being beaten? And he said, how can you feel pain when you're dead already? Now, this is an articulate 17-year-old boy now, and the tragedy is that he's able to be so articulate about what's happened. So UNICEF, they try to pick up the pieces. They try to retrace the families. They try to rehabilitate and reintegrate. And they give the children a voice so that even though their childhood was taken, the children can have an opportunity to be educated so that they ensure it never happens to their children. And for that, UNICEF needs money, and I would urge people to give it.
And is there a record of these boys being rehabilitated? I mean, they're not beyond reach?
No, absolutely. No, they're found. UNICEF and its partners find these children. They finance and set up organisations for therapy, for counselling, for getting them back into their sense of community, for finding jobs for them, and for... They encourage the children to talk about their problems in the same way that, happened in South Africa with the Peace and Reconciliation, the same thing with Bloody Sunday. They encourage people to address the problems of the past so they can move on. But, these are traumatised children, and you do think to yourself, how on earth can it happen? What cause is worth that, religion?
It's particularly horrible, that entire thing, isn't it? And it's extraordinary that, you, in a sense, it's a privilege of being given the chance to have a look at
it's a complete privilege, and people are sceptical, I think, sometimes of actors or whoever, or celebrities, for want of a better word, who go into these things. I get an enormous amount out of it. I'm aware that my shelf life as an actor is probably not that long, and it's diminishing every day, probably. And for me to be able to go out and do that is incredibly rewarding to me. And as you say, as my mother gets on in her years, the only boy was a missionary for a wee bit,
And the Jekyll and Hyde starts, BBC?
Saturday, 16th of June, BBC. They can watch that, then switch over to you.
James Nesbitt, thank you very much indeed.